Welcome to what have I just read here on St Andrew's Church on Wednesday, the 16th of August, with Nadia, Mike, and the jingle. And we have read more Jeremiah, back to Jeremiah this time, back to our regular readings, and he is asking them not to go.
Yeah, because actually we skipped the previous chapter, because on Monday we read chapter 41
that's
and
right.
today, so we skipped 42 and then so today we're reading 43.
Right.
And in chapter 42, all those people who are mentioned here, they asked Jeremiah to ask God what they should do. And he did. So Jeremiah asked God, so 10 days later or something like this, God gave him the answer, and he said, tell the people not to go to Egypt, tell them to stay in Judah, in Jerusalem. But it looks like here they're saying, no, this is not what God told you, we don't believe you. So
it's interesting, exactly.
Yeah.
In fact, Farah, thank you. Farah's building on that very point, because actually they were afraid of the Chaldeans, so they all wants to go to Egypt, and particularly fearful because that horrific reading we had on Monday. Do you remember when what's his name, Nehemiah, someone or other, who murdered those guys, the governor at dinner? So there's a lot of fear. So everyone wants to flee, and then we have in 42. God saying, actually, stay.
Don't be afraid of
Ishmael, thank you. Thank you, Farah. It's hard to be doing this and looking down here at the same time. And then so God is saying, stay. It's not a problem. And everyone's like, what? Of course we're going to Egypt. We're not staying here.
So they asked Jeremiah to ask God, and now they
they won't believe him.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because everything he's said so far has always come true, hasn't it? So it's intriguing. It's like they won't listen to him. It says you are telling a lie. The Lord our God did not send you to say, do not go to Egypt. And yet we've seen in all the previous chapters that pretty much, in fact, everything he has said so far has come true. So it's really interesting how people, it's like, this guy has always told you the truth, so you just don't want to listen to him because you just don't want to listen to him. It doesn't matter what he says, you've made up your mind anyway to go.
And in the first place, they themselves asked Jeremiah to ask God what they should do, but then they get the answer they don't like, and
so they just ignore it. They were just hoping to get the answer they wanted, and then they felt good about it. But now they got the answer they didn't want, so they just ignore it. It's very human, that actually, isn't it? It's when you go out and you get a piece of research, and it's just either to basically agree with what you think or to be ignored if it disagrees.
That's the first reaction.
It's amazing that, and I think there's also the feeling that they're all in. I think they're all in fear of their lives, right, from the Babylonians. They fear that the Babylonians are going to put them to death, right? So I think that's.
But then that's interesting. Again, there's a bit of the cliffhanger that we often get. So then when they actually go to Egypt, because they don't want to listen to what God has told Jeremiah.
Right.
Told them through Jeremiah. And then God speaks, when they are in Egypt, God speaks to Jeremiah again, and he says, well, take the stones, bury them in the clay pavement that's at the entrance to Pharaoh's palace, so that all Judeans see it. So he's going to teach them another lesson. Looks like it.
Right.
So, and then he says what will happen. So he says that the king of Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar, will come, and then he'll destroy the place. So this is coming.
This is coming. And I just find this interesting. Those who are destined for pestilence, those destined to captivity, those who are destined for the sword, to the sword. It's kind of an interesting prediction that everyone kind of has a plan, even if it's a sword plan. I thought, gosh, that sounds a bit grim.
Yeah, it does.
Interesting. Yeah. And then on to Mark.
Yeah.
Lots of stuff here.
Yeah.
And what did you make? I got anything you made of the first part. How can Satan cast out Satan? How can homes work if they're divided? It's interesting.
Yeah, and I thought it's, again, sometimes we have it that those two readings, the first and the second, somehow linked, somehow match. And here again, I thought that Jesus was in a similar situation to that of Jeremiah. So he was saying something, but people were accusing him that this is Beelzebul speaking through him. So he's
they don't want to listen. Exactly. Yeah.
And then he replies to them in parables. You know.
And it's interesting, the second part about his mother, it's quite very famous, that one.
Yeah.
Right? It's his mother, the crowd came and said, your mother and your brothers are sitting outside asking you. And he replies, who are my mother and brothers? Looking at those who sat around, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother, my sister and my mother. It's very interesting. There's an interesting podcast called Sideways, with a gentleman, and I'll put it on the chat. But he's very interesting because he has a sort of different approach to what's happened, looking at data from events in different ways. You may often say the Concorde crash. You look at that picture, the famous picture of the Concorde taking off with the fire coming out of the back of it. Everyone goes, well, of course, that's why it crashed. Actually, that's not why it crashed. But you look at the fire coming out the back, and actually people will say they could have survived the fire coming out the back. That picture was survivable, but a bunch of other stuff happened. So it's really interesting. And he does that. He looks at all these things. And he goes, in fact, what we see on the surface is not what we think at all. And he talks about how Christianity has actually opened us all to the idea of this, kind of in this, my brother and whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother. Because at that time people were very much living in families and clans, and you lived in a very close-knit group, and the others were very much other. And he actually looks very interestingly at how Christianity changes that, because suddenly whoever does the will of God is my brother. So suddenly it opens up the world in a different way.
It's very progressive.
Very, very marry people from outside our immediate tribal group, that we can interact, that we can have relations. He's very interesting about the way he looks at this effect on the way Christianity spreads and society develops.
I think it gives so much hope, because you are not doomed by what you have when you're born, what you're born into, so you can choose and...
that's a really good point, isn't it? Because in the Old Testament, it always goes on about, and your brothers and your your offspring will be condemned forever, and that's the end, and you're all written off. I've always thought it's really depressing. It's like we're all written off because of something done by someone long before us, of which we have no control. And it's very true. It's like it does change that.
Yeah. And again, so you said that the first reading ended on a very gloomy note, and here is the opposite. So this reading from Mark ends on a very positive note, which gives you hope. So
Exactly.
Hope to lonely people, or to people who are not happy with what they had when they were born, and
basically, because whoever does the will of God, there is the truth of it. Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Afira, for your comments. You're such a help. You're like the technical person, on these radio shows or on talk shows where there's always the thing in their ear, and there's someone like talking to them saying, now say this, now say that. A bit of information. So just like that, we see Ishmael. It's exactly. Thank you so much.